before going through a long go around the table. But this is good, so everyone's microphone is working, which is nice. And during the classes, feel free to jump in. Interruptions are welcome. This should be a conversation, ideally, although I will have a lot of material to cover. So yeah, feel free to ask questions, clarify things. That's good. And yeah, I will quickly present the course and show you the resources that you can go to look at the class notes, look at the homework, and that kind of thing. And then we'll get started with the first lesson. Yeah. Good. So let's just talk about the philosophy to start with. So a lot of you come from different backgrounds. Some of you have used JavaScript before, quite a bit, others not so much. And so this course will be focusing on the fundamentals of JavaScript. We will go into details for some topics, but the focus will be on engineering. Right? So it'll be on writing good code, writing quality code, how to test it properly, and there will be a lot of what we're going to do is going under the layer that you might see. So if you get a nice API layer from jQuery, we're going to dive underneath and see how they do it. We're going to dive underneath React and see how they do that. That's gonna be our MO, if you will. It's going to be about uncovering the magic from the frameworks. Good. And yeah, I encourage you to participate in class, but also on Slack. If you have questions, you can go on Slack and discuss various things there. If you have trouble with the homework, you can also go there and ask questions. Yeah. So you should have access to the Slack channel. If you don't, you can reach out to me or to Codementor. And on the Slack channel, I pinned a post that should give you access to the class notes. So I can show you the class notes right now. Let me just share my screen. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so you should have access to the Slack channel here. I would encourage you to use the Slack channel and avoid the Zoom chat because the Zoom chat goes away after the session, whereas the Slack chat stays there. So yeah, just use Slack, and the class notes are in the pinned item. So you can click here, get the pinned items, and expand here. And the link here will give you access to the class notes, and the class notes look something like this. Good. So first lesson is number 1 here. Good. So yeah, so that was the introduction of the course. Yeah. So let me just say a couple words about myself. I'm a freelancer / coach. I've been a consultant, I've been a developer. I've worked in different places, but I'm currently based in Germany, in Berlin. And I tend to work with clients and students on various web apps, a lot of mobile websites, and a little bit of mobile development as well. Good. So yeah, so let's get into lesson 1. Lesson 1 is going to be a little bit different from the usual lessons. You might be a little overwhelmed. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. We're going to be doing a lot of things. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics and how they fit together. So you shouldn't feel overwhelmed and feel like this course is too much for you. The rest of the lessons will come back to a lot of these topics, and we'll go deeper on all of these topics. Right? So today is mostly about giving an introduction, introducing a bunch of topics, and I want to give you an idea of what you would need to do to build an app from nothing. All right? So if you didn't have a generator, or if you didn't have the Create React App project, if you didn't have a team that already has a code base, what would you do to get started on your own from the first line of HTML? So that'll be our goal today. Good. So let's just get started. Okay, so we want to build an app that hopefully does something, and we have nothing. So I'm going to start with just a new directory. So I'm going to call this new app. Okay, and I'm going to cd into that directory. And then here, I'm just going to create my first HTML file. So this is going to be normal HTML. Up. All right. Okay, and here I'm going to put in some content. It says welcome. Very good. And I'm going to open that file in the browser. App index HTML. Yeah, sorry, let's go here. Good. So we have our app here. So you could say the app works, even though it doesn't do very much. So this is my HTML file in my browser. I've opened the developer tools here on the left. We'll become much more intimate with developer tools as the course progresses. But yeah, I like to keep them open. It's a good habit. Good. So we have our first piece of HTML. Okay. Good. And we want to include a JavaScript file, right? So you might have some content in HTML, but you need some functionality, some interaction, something special. So we need JavaScript. So let's include a script. So here I'm going to do script source index.js. Like this, very good. And I'm actually going to switch to Atom now that we have multiple files. And I'm going to create this index.js file. Okay, good. So let me create a new file here. I'm going to call this index.js. And just to be sure that the file is loaded properly, I'm going to console log a message here. So file loaded. Okay, let me save this and try that again in the browser. Okay, good. So you can see the app still works. We have the content, and you can see the two files have been loaded by the browser. Everything's fine. Now, so far it's been pretty trivial. We haven't done anything special. This is something that you would have done 10 years ago as well. So let's get into something a bit more modern. Yeah? So I want to not only run my own JavaScript code, but I want to use a third-party library. Right? So in here we'll have Moment as our example of a third-party library. We want to make use of that module. So let's import it. Right? Now, what I would like to write is here in this index.js file, I would like to write import moment from moment. Okay. So here I'm using an ES6 import statement. Okay. This is a new thing in JavaScript. If you've never seen this before, that's normal. But it works just like any other import statement in other languages, or the idea is the same. But it won't work just like that. Right? So we'll have to do a bit more. The first thing we'll have to do is actually install the library. Okay. So I'm going to use Yarn here to download the moment.js file. So if you've used NPM before, Yarn is a replacement for NPM, or an alternative, if you will. I tend to prefer Yarn. Feel free to use NPM, but in all of our examples during the course, we'll be using Yarn. So here I'm doing Yarn add, moment, and then Yarn's going to go out and fetch the code from moment. Good. And now you can see that Yarn, moment is installed in my node modules.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
What is the advantage of Yarn instead of using NPM?
Or Bower.
Or Bower, yeah. I think Bower is used mostly by front-end developers. I actually haven't used it in a while. But NPM is more, I get the feeling NPM is more about both backend and frontend. And NPM does a lot of things right. And if you know how to use it, if you're a power user of NPM, you're going to get a lot of what you get from Yarn. But Yarn tends to make the right thing easy. So it'll have better default options, and it will keep a lock file of the things that you installed by default. All right, so you can see there's a file here called yarn.lock. Right? So that'll be a file that contains all the dependencies and the versions that have been installed. And so that's pretty useful because you can be sure that the next developer will use the same version numbers for each package, right? Because in your package JSON, you can specify a version, but it's not always an exact version, right? It might be, you might be able to say, I want a version that's higher than version 2, so it's ambiguous. But in the yarn lock file, it's not ambiguous, it's exact. Right? So this is the version that I've installed exactly, and if I push that into my Git repository and some other developer pulls that down, when they do yarn install, they will have the exact same version. So that's pretty good as well. Also, I find that yarn is better at communicating with me. Like the messaging is more intuitive, and it's way faster than NPM.
Okay, thanks.
So that's why we use it. But if you want to stay with NPM, that is not a problem. You should stay with NPM. Good.
So if you're somebody that's completely new to using Terminal and these types of apps, are these apps being used, forgive me if I'm completely off base, are these apps being used, Yarn, for example, to go and fetch the script and put it on my computer, basically, or reference it instead of going and getting it and doing it manually?
Yeah, that's right. So
is that the only thing that this is providing?
It's one of the things. It's not the only,
Okay.
but yeah. So like the old-fashioned way would be to go onto the GitHub project for that GitHub page for that project,
Right.
get the bundle that they give you, the moment.js file, download it, put it on your local file system, and include it in your HTML. Right? That's the old way.
Right.
It's possible to do that way, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot easier to just type in yarn add moment done. Okay.
Great.
But also, Yarn will give you access to different versions of that library. So if you wanted to install the previous version, or if you wanted to use the beta version of that library, Yarn would make that really easy for you.
Right.
Okay.
I love it.
And yeah, and the package JSON file will also keep so this is a maintained list of all your dependencies in your project. Okay. So that can be useful as well. And if another developer pulls down your code, they won't have to do anything special to go and get the different files. They can just do yarn install, and then yarn knows all your dependencies and will go and fetch them.
Okay.
So that's good as well.
Yeah. It kind of catalogs everything that's being pulled. It has a really intelligent name for its product. Yarn. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the logo is a little cat. Yeah. And what else? Yeah, it also gives you, it also works just like NPM with this package JSON file. So this package JSON file can also be used to automate a few tasks. So you can have a script section, and you can say, whenever you do npm start, I want you to actually do this other command. And so you can list a bunch of commands that you use often as a developer, and give, they're basically bookmarks for commands that you do often. So that's good as well. Something else that you have is you can install binary packages, or you can install packages that have an executable in them. All right, so if I look at node modules / .bin, okay, it doesn't exist yet. But so maybe moment doesn't have an executable. But if your library has an executable, so for example, Yarn has one, then you'll have access to it. So Yarn can put it on your path, and you can just run the executable from here. Yeah. And all these things are namespaced, if you will, or scoped to the current directory. Right? All the modules are downloaded into node modules. Okay, in Atom, it'll be easier to see. So now under new app, I have node modules, and I'll have all my dependencies here.
Is Atom a text editor app or more?
It's a text editor. It's a smart text editor. So okay, you might be using brackets or Sublime.
I've been using Coda.
I've actually never heard of this one. Okay. But so yeah, so if you're using Sublime, brackets, whatever works, all these editors are sort of the same. Just make sure that you have the basic necessities, right? So you should have syntax highlighting, you should have a file tree, you should have various things like this. And yeah, if you're looking for a new text editor, Atom is not bad.
Awesome. Okay.
Good. So let's go back to this list here. So we've downloaded.
One quick question further about Atom. Is that a text editor that you're using in Terminal?
It's not. It's an actual window. So my Atom is here. The text editor that I was using before was Vim, and that was from the terminal. But Atom is just a normal window.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good. So let's see. So we've been using this import statement here. So this is very optimistic at this point, but let's just see how it fails. Okay. So I'm going to refresh here, up, and I have an error. Here it says unexpected token import, right? So this is to be expected. These ES6 import statements aren't supported out of the box in browsers, okay? Which doesn't mean we can't use them. We're still going to use them, but we'll have to transform our JavaScript into an older version of JavaScript, if you will, into something that the browser will be able to understand. Okay, so we will want to take our JavaScript, transform it. We'll be using Babel, and then Babel will help us take this code and turn it into something the browser can understand. So that's what the next step is about. So here I am installing quite a few modules, but mostly this is Webpack and Babel. Okay. So here I'm forcing Yarn to give me Webpack version 2. That's what the add2 is for here. So this is one of the advantages of using something like Yarn. And so I'm installing Webpack and Babel. So yeah, so Babel is the thing that will help us do the transformation, and Webpack is it's a magnificent build tool that does a lot of things. And so we are going to use Babel through Webpack. Okay. So more information on that in a second. Good. So everything's fine. All these modules have been installed properly. You can also, so you see now we have a lot more, many more dependencies in our node modules.
Hey, Matt.
Directory. Yep.
One of the things that sucks with this the screen share is when you're in terminal and like you're down at the bottom of the screen, everything we see is covered up with the bottom bar, which I guess is the zoom control bar or something.
Okay.
So maybe if you could make your terminal just a little bit, yeah, that's perfect.
Do you think that's good? Yeah. Yeah. Let me know if it's good. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh,
Matt.
good. Now we can see.
Matt?
Yep.
Sorry, quick question. Are you going to be dwelling a bit more on Webpack at some point on the course, or no?
We'll be using it more. And yeah, I'm just about to talk about it a little more now.
Okay, okay, thanks.
But yeah, we'll be using it for examples and that kind of thing.
And can you say a little more about what Babel is doing and explain that a little bit?
Yes. Let's just use it, and I can show you the initial JavaScript and the result. Okay. And basically, Babel that's what Babel is doing for us. It's this transformation. So let's just set up the project to use Babel through Webpack. All right. So if you've used Gulp or Grunt or Broccoli or Brunch, there's a million of those. But Webpack is basically an alternative to these. Okay. So let's set up Webpack. So Webpack, much like all of these alternatives, works with a config file. So I'm just going to copy this minimalist configuration into a new file. Okay, so usually this is called Webpack config.js. Good. So let's just have a quick look at this configuration here. So this is simply JavaScript.
Sorry, Matt. From where we can copy paste those examples?
Yeah. So if you go to the class notes, you'll have access to this. Right. So this is the first chapter, the first lesson. So you can just follow the link here, and it'll take you to the GitHub gist.
Okay. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So let's have a quick look here. So yeah, so this configuration file is just JavaScript. So you should be able to understand at least the syntax of it. Here, we're requiring the Webpack module, which we've just installed. Here, we're using require instead of an import statement. This code isn't meant to be run in the browser. It's really only going to run in a Node environment. So I'm happy to use require here, which is the usual way to require code in a Node ecosystem. So this is basically going out and fetching the Webpack code, and here we set up the configuration. So there's a couple of interesting things. One is the entry point on line 6. So the entry point is telling Webpack where to start. So Webpack is going to look at this index.js file, and it's going to apply a set of rules to it, and it's going to output a bundle file or the result file. Okay, and all of this is going to start from index.js. And so Webpack is pretty smart. It's going to go through the code in index.js. It's going to see that there's an import statement, and it's going to go and fetch that package, the moment package, and it's going to take that code and bundle it together along with index.js. Okay, and the result will be a file called bundle.js, which will contain both of these things. It will contain index.js and moment.
Matt, I have a question about two ways of importing. You said import moment is like a ES6 thing, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that require is like a common JS thing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So just two phrases. Can you explain the difference actually, or it's too advanced for the course?
Yeah, no, it's not too advanced. Yeah, so require is the usual way you would require something in Node. That's called the common JS paradigm. Okay.
Yeah.
And the idea is definitely the same. So it's really just about going out and fetching the right file from a
yeah,
Node
but sometimes in an Angular, in a big Angular project, we can have several syntaxes, and it can be very tricky and very confusing. Actually, that's why I'm putting the question. Actually.
Okay. So
it's basically that using require and import is for a new version of JavaScript, which browsers don't support yet. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So when it comes to your own code, I believe you should only strive to use import. Okay, because import is future-proof. It's what's going to work in the future. It's going to work in the back end. It's going to work in the front end. That's what you should be using. It's the new thing, but it's also the standard thing. Okay.
And if we do here on the Webpack config the import, how would we look the import? It would look like var Webpack imports Webpack, or
right. It could look like this. The problem is that we need the help of Babel and Webpack in order to actually use the import statements. Okay. Yeah. So it would be a bit difficult to use import statements here. It's much easier to just use require here. And this code is never going to run in the browser anyway.
I understand.
So not a big deal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but so my advice is to use import statements all the time. Though, so I would call this ES6 modules or import statements. That's what you should be striving for. You might hear about CommonJS. You might hear about AMD. You might hear about UMD. Okay. If you can, just avoid all of this and just use import statements.
Actually, in the Angular 2, the imports are the standard, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Good. So this is what the entry point is. It's telling Webpack where to start, and then this output piece here is telling Webpack where to put the output. So bundle.js inside the JS directory will contain index.js and moment. Okay, and that's useful because we can push that bundle to the browser, and then the browser can just find moment within the bundle. It won't have to come back to the server. But so that does mean that we have to go back into our HTML and change index.js for js/bundle.js. Okay, so that's going to be the output from Webpack, but it doesn't exist yet. All right, so let's go back into the terminal and run Webpack. Okay. And good. So this is so this worked well. Now we have a bundle.js file that's available. Total size more than 1 megabyte. And the file is now under the JS directory. Yes, this works well. Now, something we haven't covered here is the configuration for Babel. So we added a rule here, and we asked Webpack to take all the files that end in JS and to run them through the Babel loader. Okay, all of the files that are imported or all the code in index.js is going to go through Babel. And let's have a look at the result. So when you come here, so this bundle.js file is actually pretty big. There's a lot of Webpack related code, and there's a lot of setup. There's a lot of overhead kind of code that needs to go in there. So it's not just index.js and Moment. There's also a bit more on top. But let's just search for our code. So we had a console log statement that said file loaded. Here we go. So this is our code on line almost 15,000. So you can see, you can sort of recognize our code here. Okay, so there's a console log statement, and the import statement was transformed into something that Webpack can understand. So you have a Webpack require, okay, and this is something that Webpack defines, and Webpack will know where to find moment when we import it like this. Okay, and moment is actually part of this file as well.
Was it Babel or Webpack that converted your code to this function interop required default blah blah blah?
Yeah. So Webpack allowed me to require different modules. Okay, and yeah, that's a good question. So for the import statements.
Actually, if I can step in, I think it's the Webpack which bring the libraries, and after the Babel compiled and transpiled to the good syntax. Actually, I think. No, is it right or?
I think they might collaborate on this. I think Babel might see the import and transform it into some form of require, and Webpack is seeing this and taking over at that point, because require statements won't work in the browser, just like that. But mostly Babel will be useful to us for transforming ES6 features into older features, if you will, into JavaScript that all browsers support. So let's see a better example of this. I'm going to go back into index.js, and I'm going to try and use some features here. So let me use the let keyword. Right? So this is, you can see this as a replacement for var. Let is a bit more predictable. So I'm going to use let all the time. So here I'm just going to create a variable date called.
What language is let in?
Say that again, sorry.
What language is let? Is that part of JavaScript, or is that part of this moments thing?
Yeah, so let is JavaScript now. So before I would have written var, but I prefer let.
Is this similar to Swift, where you have var and let access to both? One can change, one's immutable.
It's different. So actually, let is mutable.
Okay.
But you can use const, and that would be immutable.
Yeah. Okay.
What does mutable mean?
Okay, let's punt that discussion if you don't mind.
Okay,
Sure.
but can you? Okay, are you punting the discussion about why you like let over var? Is that what we're punting?
I was trying to punt the immutable versus mutable conversation.
Okay. See,
So here,
Matt, I think your audience is coming from old school JavaScript, and you're jumping right into ES6. And a lot of these people are like, what the heck is ES6, and how can you use let? And
aren't we learning JavaScript?
but a new form of JavaScript.
Yeah. So the good news is you can keep using all the things you know about JavaScript. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is made wrong by ES6. It all works still. But ES6 does have a lot of features that will make your life easier. So I'm jumping into ES6 because that's kind of the modern way, and it's also a really good example for why Webpack is useful to us and why Babel is useful to us. And those are the things that you want to do when you start from scratch. So if you have a React project, for instance, you'll see import statements like these, and you might think that this is a React thing, but it's not. It's a Webpack/ES6 thing.
Hey Matt, just in one small question, what is the moment do? Just in one sentence, do we need it in most
I
of
didn't see that. Right. So moment is a date library. So you can print dates. You can calculate how many seconds there are between two times. You can format dates, that kind of thing.
Got it.
That's what it does. So yeah. So let's come back to let. I prefer let to var always because let is more predictable. So there are situations where you might have a for loop, and then maybe you'll have a variable here. So I might say like var name is equal to Joe. Okay, so name here is, it looks like it might only be accessible within the for loop, right? But actually that's not true. Name is available here as well, right? I can totally access the name here. Right? And so there's something unpredictable about var in that way. And then if I use let here, then everything works as I would expect. Name is only going to be available within the block. So let gives you block scope.
Oh, okay.
Which is nice. But otherwise, it works pretty much the same as var. Good. So yeah, so here I'm using let. And let's also use just another ES6 feature to see Babel at work. So I'm going to create a function. Let's call it append date. Okay, and I'm going to use the fat arrow syntax. Okay, so here, so this is just a way to declare a function. Okay, so in between parentheses, we have the arguments. This function doesn't take any arguments. And then you have a fat arrow followed by braces, and that's it. So this is just a different way of declaring a function. It tends to be more concise. And if your function is short, you can even put it on one line, and then you can remove the curly braces, which is nice. And we'll be talking more about this later.
And I'm sorry, did you say that those two are the same? Or no?
Yeah, so this is similar to function, function append date parentheses braces.
Yeah, that's great.
Does that make sense?
You can leave that there. That would be great.
Sure. Yep. You'll also see that in the output from Babel. So let's just write the current date. So I'm going to try this moment. Sorry, date. Write date. Okay. So here I'm just trying to write the current date to the browser, to the document. Good. So every time I make a change here, I have to run Webpack to get the new bundle. So let me run Webpack here, and then I'll open up the bundle. If I look for append date here, so this is the function. Okay, so Babel took the ES6 JavaScript that we had, transformed it into this this new JavaScript, right? So you can see the let keyword is gone, replaced with var, and the fat arrow syntax is gone, replaced with the old-fashioned or the traditional function syntax. So this is nice. This is a guarantee for us that we can use this code in many more places. Right? We don't need a browser that supports all these fancy ES6 features. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to go back to the app here and refresh. Okay, it doesn't work because we haven't called the function. So I'm just going to come here, and I'm just going to call append date. Let me run Webpack one more time. Okay, I'm going to refresh here, and here we go. So now we have the current date being printed to the document. So we've already done many things. We have some HTML, we have some JavaScript. We can use new features of JavaScript. We can even use experimental features if we want to. And then we have a mechanism for transforming from future JavaScript into standard JavaScript. So that's a good situation to be in. Good. So let's see. The next logical step could be to include some of your own code into your code base, right? So maybe from index.js, you might want to import another file. So, if you put all your code in one file, it might grow to be a really big file. And at some point, you want to separate it out. So let's say we want to move the append date function to its own file. Right? So we want to do something like import append date from append date. Okay. Now let's just take all this code and put it into a new file. Append date.js here, and I'm going to put that here. Okay. And because append date is now a module, I have to export what I want to make available to those that import. In a different world, maybe this function would have been global, but we don't want to do that anymore. We actually want to just export an object, and that becomes our contribution to the code base. So here I'm just going to do export default append date. Good. That should be
by default.
Yes.
Yeah, why default?
Yeah. So if I don't put default, it will export an object like this. Whereas if I do, if I don't use default, I would have to change the syntax that I use for importing. So here I'm doing import append date from append date. So this will be the default export. Okay. So the next question would be, what is not a default export? So you could do something like, I want to import append date, but I also want to import something else called helper. Okay. So you can import multiple things from a module. Okay.
You can import basically sections of the file instead of the whole file.
So the whole file is going to be read when you import, but when you export, you can export different bits of the file. So you can export different functions or different properties. So if I do export append date and then export something else, maybe helper. So let helper, or let's make this a number. Let number, and then here I'm exporting append date and number. Okay, so if you look at this export statement, and if you want to use append date from that export, you're going to have to write something like import append date like this with curly braces. This might be a bit confusing. When do you need curly braces? When not?
That's because append date's a function, right? If you wanted to import append date and number, you would just do a common number without the curly braces?
With curly braces. Yeah, with curly braces. So this is an example of object destructuring, which is another ES6 feature. Okay, but we'll be using that kind of code in every lesson, and you get used to it. It looks a little strange at first, but it sort of makes sense.
The analogy behind this is more like kind of keeping some functions private and some functions public, something like that, you can say.
Yeah, for example, it's also a good idea to only make certain things available. So if one client only needs one function from your module, you can separate out that function from another function that might be used by another client. Right. So the idea is to just provide the minimum necessary to each client. So in this case here, I'm exporting two things: a property and a function, and that's it. Although in this case, this is probably too complex for our needs. What I really want to do is export default append date, and that's going to simplify the import. So this will be the thing that gets imported when you don't specify anything special. So if I go back here and just do import append date, I'm just going to get the appended function, end of story. So this is import export the easy way. Good. So I'm importing moment, which is a third-party library. I'm importing append date, which is from my own code, and then I'm calling append date as a function. Okay. So let's run Webpack and see how that works. Okay. So Webpack is going to go through index.js, and it's going to look for the import statements and look for these files. So it looks like it can't find the append date function. Let's see. Maybe I made a typo here. Append date. Ah, yeah, good. So what I should have done is // here. So I'm telling Webpack where to find this file. So current directory, right there. So it's a file in the current directory.
But it doesn't need you to put the file extension on there, huh?
No, it doesn't. Yeah. Good. So yeah, so when it comes to moment, we didn't have to say where it was because it's smart enough to understand the node modules kind of structure. So it knew where to go. But append date is from our own code. So we have to be a little bit more specific, although you can also configure Webpack to tell it where your own files are. Good.
So it's sounding like Webpack is almost like a compiler, like a SAS compiler or something like that.
Yeah, very much. It takes one version of your code, the original version, and compiles it into something that you can actually use.
Yeah.
It's also pretty useful to have all of your files result into just one single file that you can include in your HTML instead of having to include a dozen files. Good. So now we have a new bundle. Let's just have a quick look here. We should have our append date function here. Good. So there you go. Append date default. There you go. So this is the append date module here being defined, and the code that we saw right before that was the index.js calling append date. Here.
Matt, the only file that gets uploaded, to when you're ready to deploy is this bundle file. Is that right?
The only JavaScript file that gets deployed, yes, that's bundle.js.
Okay.
But you might also need images, CSS, and that kind of thing, and HTML. Good. So let me refresh here. Okay. Uncut reference error moment is not defined. Good. So we must have a simple error. Good. So I imported moment in the wrong file. So I'm going to remove it from here, from index, and add it to append date. Good. So you can already see a huge advantage from doing it like this with ES6 and modules. Now it's really clear that the append date module requires the moment library. Okay, and then from index.js, I don't need to import it from there, right? So the knowledge, so if you were working on the append date module, you have all the knowledge that you need to care about within that module. It's a lot more constrained. It's a lot more encapsulated.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't have a main app.js file, or maybe I'm missing this up, where you have all your import statements, you can just use them across your whole app, or is that just not bad practice?
Yeah, that's not great because it breaks that idea, right?
Okay.
It's useful to have a module that can take care of itself.
Gotcha.
So this is a bit of a new thing in JavaScript. Now it's all about modules, which is something that we've had for a long time in other languages and ecosystems. Now it's finally coming to JavaScript. Angular 2 is very modular, so is React and ES6. They all give you ways to create modules and components and encapsulate your code. So yeah, so it's a good idea, and it's not just a good idea in JavaScript.
Is ES6 comparable to React? Sorry, I'm ignorant about that.
Yeah, no. So JavaScript is the language. ES6 is the latest standard that discusses the features that this language should have, and that's different from React, which is a framework which you could see as a big library. and framework will help you build apps. It'll help you do things that you would have to do if you had to build an app. So if you build an app, if I build an app, there's going to be things that we have to do, both of us. And so instead of doing it ourselves, we pull in React, and we can both use the same library, or the same framework.
Thanks.
Yeah. We'll be talking a lot more about frameworks towards the end of the course. Good. So we're back to a working application. All right. So we have the date here. We have the index.html being loaded and the bundle.js being loaded, and all of this is working well. So our app is pretty simple. There's no real functionality, but there's no reason why there couldn't be any. Like we are in a very good situation to write modern JavaScript, import libraries as we want, and we could start building. We could start importing React and actually building an application, or we could just roll our own. We're in a good situation here. Okay, so I'm going to skip step 11 here. Now, yeah, so one thing that's important here is that we are still loading the app from the file system. If you look at the protocol here, it's file : //. So the browser is just reading the file from the file system, which isn't going to work when I make this app available to the public. Right? I'm the only one that can read from my file system. So we're going to have to serve the app. Okay. So we'll be using Express. So this is a web server. I'm just going to install it with Yarn here. Express is nice because it's powerful, but it's also pretty simple. So when your needs are simple, the code is simple, which is nice. So here, this is one of the simplest web servers you can configure in Express. I'm just going to create a new file here and call it server.js and paste the server in here. So we can have a quick look, but I'm really just requiring Express, creating an application, and I'm instructing Express to serve the file statically from the current directory, and that's it. And all this is going to happen on port 3000. So let's just try that quickly. Here, I'm going to execute server.js using the node command, and that's it. So our app is now listening on port 3000. So I can go back to the browser and forget about the file protocol, and I just want to do localhost / 3000. Okay, and that's going to be my web server, and my web server is going to give me the index.html file and everything else that comes with it. All right, so we've decoupled ourselves from the file system. So at this point, we could take the server and put it in the cloud on some instance in the cloud. Then you could just access it from anywhere. Right?
Do you tend to use Express.js rather than like amps or some kind of packaged app, MAMP or amps? Or...
sorry,
I guess, do you use Express for all your projects to create the server for all your projects when you're developing locally?
You certainly can. In this case, we really just want a file, like a normal web server that's going to serve files. So you could use Apache, you could use Nginx, you could use any number of web servers. There's really a ton. But Express is a JavaScript web server, and it's quite popular.
Okay.
So I quite like to use it. There's also a few frameworks, a few backend frameworks that are built on top of Express. So you can use that. You can use it there as well. Yeah. But so the next step would have been to do just that, to create an instance in the cloud, then take our code, push it into the slice, and run node server.js onto there, and then that would have made our app public, available to anyone. Okay. Unfortunately, we're running out of time for today, but we've built something simple, but it's something that's very promising. So a lot of our needs are being met by this simple setup. Okay.
Would your Express server understand PHP?
No, it won't.
Okay.
No. So in this situation, we're just trying to serve files. So when we do express static period, right, we're telling Express what to do. Just serve whatever file statically from the current directory. And in the default options, it's understood that index.html is going to be like the default entry point. So when I come here and do localhost 3000, Express is going to look at index.html and give it to the browser.
What step installed that JS folder? Did you get that?
Say that again, sorry.
I said, what step installed the JS folder in our app?
Yeah. So in the Webpack config, I told Webpack to create the JS directory here.
I see. Thanks.
And that directory will contain bundle. So as soon as I ran Webpack, the JS directory was created. Yeah. Good. So that's the end of the roller coaster. Okay, so we've built an app. It's using the modern techniques. We can use whatever new features we want, and it's going to work well. And we have a way to deploy our application. Okay. So you can feel free to feel free to go through these steps on your own, maybe more slowly. And if you have any questions, you can just come by the Slack channel.
Are we added to the Slack channel, or do we have to? How do we get access to the Slack channel? Yeah,
if you give me your name, I'll make sure you have access to it.
It's my name, Deborah.Gitterman@gmail.
Okay, good. Good. Excellent. Does everyone else have access to the Slack channel?
Yep. Yep.
Quick question about ES6. Is it, when it says the newest version of JavaScript, ES6, is that a new version of JavaScript, or is it considered a different dialect of JavaScript, kind of like jQuery? Or am I looking at this totally wrong?
Right. So it's not like jQuery, but yeah. So it's a bit confusing, but there's a lot of different concepts here. There's JavaScript, the language. There's JavaScript, the specification. There's JavaScript, the virtual machine. So there's a lot of concepts, but basically there's a standards organization that discusses what JavaScript should be. Okay, and so you can publish, you can recommend features, and then there's going to be a working group that's going to work through each feature, and they will decide whether a feature makes it or not into JavaScript. And at some point, a feature becomes standard or recommended, and then the browser manufacturers start implementing that feature into JavaScript.
Okay.
When we talk about ES6 being the newest feature of JavaScript, we're saying that the JavaScript standard from that organization now contains these features.
Isn't it comparable to WC3, like the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's similar to the process with HTML or CSS.
Okay.
I think it's confusing to us because the ECMA is a confusing acronym, but it stands for European something Commission on something.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it started out as ECMAScript, which is and ECMA is that standards organization. That's right. So ES6 is maybe it's a bit of a misnomer. So JavaScript used to be ECMAScript 3, or I guess 1 at some point, but ECMAScript 3, 4, 5, and then ECMAScript 5 or ES5 was really popular. Almost every browser is compatible with all the features specified in the ES5 standards. And then ES6, those are the new features, but really we should be saying ES 2015. And then so those are all the standards that were approved in that year. And then you have ES 2016, 2017. Right? And then I think we're slowly transitioning towards using years to version JavaScript. Basically, there's the body of recommendations. They approve things. The browser manufacturers start building the features, and then the support comes slowly, and it varies across browsers. But the older a feature is, the more likely it is to be supported in any given browser. And that's it. If you're curious as to like what features are supported where, you can always go to caniuse.com, and let's say you want to use import statement. You can just put in import here, and you'll have search results. So HTML imports, that's not what we're interested in. And the ES6 module, that's the feature we're interested in. And so you can have a look here, and you can see that actually ES6 modules are not supported at all, except maybe for the next versions of Safari. All right, so that can give you a good idea of the state of things. If you look at like the let keyword, you can see that's supported almost everywhere. So that's the actual knowledge that you're going to be interested in. It doesn't really matter if a feature is part of ES5, 6, or 7. What you usually care about is whether the feature is for sure or is it experimental. And if the feature is for sure and you want to use it, what is the current browser support for it? And you can get that information from caniuse.com. It's a great resource.
Yeah, I love it.
Matt, a little question. Is it good practice to use Express together with React?
Sure. Yeah. It depends what kind of setup you have. Maybe you have some kind of isomorphic setup, in which case I'm not sure what you would do there. But if you have a normal React like client-side app, it's totally fine to use Express.
Okay.
I have also a quick question, Matt. I see on the JavaScript course content, you have a tip for Webpack Dev Server. What is the difference between Webpack Dev Server and our Express server we just did?
Right. So the Webpack Dev Server will also work as a web server, and it can compile your code automatically when you make changes. Right. So during this lesson, I was making a change and saving the file, going into the command line and running Webpack. Right? So that can become tedious, but you can use Webpack to watch the files, and as soon as you save a change, it will rebundle and make that bundle available to the browser. It might even reload the page for you, or reload the sections of the page that should change.
So pretty much, Webpack Dev Server includes our server.js, right?
Yeah, it does what server.js does, but and a bit more. But the Webpack Dev Server is not something you want to use in production. Right? So when it comes a time to deploy your app, you don't want to use that. So you want to use something more like the server.js.
Yeah, right.
So Webpack Dev Server is for development.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, good. So yeah, have a look at the class notes from lesson 1. There's also a few notes on important ES6 features. There's quite a few of them, and I would recommend that you focus on these here. So object syntax, destructuring, modules, let for of ES6. We'll be using all of these during the course as well, so you can get used to them. Good. Also, if you haven't done it yet, I would encourage you to go through the pre-work. So from the class notes, you have access to the pre-work. You can just go through this list here.
Just a quick question, Matt. I installed Yarn by MSE, but when I did in the Bash console Yarn version, it told me I didn't find the command. Should I restart Windows or?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but maybe you could send a question in the Slack channel, and I can help you there.
Okay. Okay.
Good. Now let's say a little bit about the homework. So you will get the most out of this course if you go through the homework. The homework will repeat some of the things that we talked about, and it'll cover a bit more, and it will give you a bit of practice with the concepts. And some of these concepts are not just knowledge. So when we talk about testing, about test-driven development, about expectations, about components, you're going to want to go through the practice of it so you can build the know-how as well as the knowledge. So yeah, so you can have a look at the first week's homework. This week it's really just readings. Sometimes you'll have a bit of code to write, or a bit of test to write, or you'll have a test to make pass. But this week it's just a few readings. I've tried to keep these these readings really high quality. So I would encourage you to read them all. And if you have any questions, or if you just want to discuss some of these ideas, you can just drop by the Slack channel.
Okay, got you.
Good.
Matt,
Any
is it gonna be at the same hour on Thursday too?
on Tuesday? Yep, same hour on Tuesday.
Oh, on Tuesday, right? Yeah.
And it looked like there was another class at night or something today. Is that wrong?
Nice.
Not for maybe a redo. Like it seemed like the class was happening at 2 different times during the day.
Yeah, so there are 2 different courses at 2 different times. Yeah. So this course meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the same time every time.
You might have just been seeing time zone differences.
Could be. Could be. So the time is 8 p.m. Berlin time, which is continental Europe. That's going to be 7 p.m. in London, and it's going to be 2 p.m. EST.
Hey Matt, one last question I have is what direction are we going towards using this course? Is it like towards more tending towards Angular 2 or React, or it's parallel path to both of this? What are we targeting?
Yeah, so the part of the philosophy is to talk about general things. So we're not trying to avoid going into details, but I'm trying to teach you to be a generalist, a JavaScript generalist. So we will talk about React and Angular 2 in lesson 6. Okay, but we will mostly talk about what frameworks do for you and how you would do that yourself. And we will go through all the concepts that you would need to understand the frameworks.
Sure. Thank you so much.
So my hope is that after this course, you can just pick up the official documentation from React and understand what is being said in that documentation, and you can just be self-reliant.
Got it.
Are we gonna learn also the building tools, things like that, or not quite?
Really, just Webpack. So you can go through the lesson 1 notes on your own, and as you do the homework, you can use Webpack. If you have any questions on this, come to the Slack channel. I was not planning on covering other build tools. But yeah,
it's very okay with me. It's a Webpack 2, actually.
Yeah, I'm using Webpack 2.
Yeah. Okay. So I did the Grunt Gulp like 3 years ago. Webpack is the thing for today, so it's okay. It's okay by me.
Yeah, Webpack is one of the most popular build tools. In fact, when you do the readings for this week, if you look at the state of JavaScript 2016, it'll give you a good idea of what tools are really popular. And if you're beginning and if you're kind of overwhelmed by the choice of tools, this survey is really useful because you can just pick the most popular tool and start there. So Webpack is the most popular tool, so we'll learn a bit of Webpack. And if you realize that that React is the most popular framework, then maybe you should start learning a bit of React. And maybe not spend too much time on things that aren't so popular. So I'm not trying to make this a popularity contest. There are good reasons to learn technologies that aren't popular, but when you're a beginner, it's probably a good idea to start with something that is popular, something that you can talk to people about, and then from there move on to other things. Yeah, so the point is also to make you ready for the next framework. Right? So we are going to talk a little bit about Angular 2 or React, but in 3 years from now, it might be something different. I'm not sure it's so interesting to spend a lot of time on React and how the intricacies of how React works. You can get that in other places. There's lots of good resources on learning the details of React. My goal is mostly to make you ready to learn React and the next framework after that and the next framework after that.
Are we going to touch a little bit TypeScript or not at all?
We can talk about it, but I wasn't planning on showing anything about it. Of course, if there's something that a majority of you wants to talk about, we can include it into the course.
Yeah, okay. I imagine if we would talk, it would be on the 6th chapter, right?
TypeScript. Yeah, actually, we're not gonna. There's no TypeScript in the syllabus.
Yeah.
You're an Angular 2 person, huh? So you need.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Quick question, and I got to run, but when I guess you ran Webpack and it took that index HTML file and it put it into the bundle.js and all that. So as your app grows and you have like, say a profile page or anything like that, is that like you create an array of all these pages and then you put that in there to put everything in the bundle? Because it has to be in a single file?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be. It's just easy that way. If you have multiple pages and you want to load different code on different pages, you can do that as well. So you can have different entry points that can result in different bundles. And then you just have to load the right bundles at the right time.
Okay.
So the key word for this would be code splitting.
Okay.
So you can definitely do that with Webpack. Good. Any final questions? No. Good.
So,
right.
so Matt, you'll be monitoring the Slack channel just over the weekend or so. Okay, great.
I'll be there for the next month. Yeah.
Is there a time span where you're more on the Slack or you're reachable all day?
Yeah, good question. So I'll be sleeping. So I'm based in Berlin, so daytime Berlin is good.
I'm actually in Paris, France, so we have the same
time zone.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I'll try to be there a lot. The course will be made better by your participation in Slack. It's nice to use to bounce ideas, ask questions, and I'm sure you can help each other as well. Lots of people have lots of experience in the group.
Yeah. And so can we just say what the hours are, the waking hours are in like the US East Coast, for instance?
East Coast, right?
I mean, I guess I can figure this out, obviously, but it might be good to
so
just.
We are 7 hours later here. So if you wake up at 9, it'll be about 4 here.
Okay.
Yeah. Good. Any other questions?
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Matt.